Welcome to another episode of The Breakdown. It's our first interview episode of the year. And we're going to jump right into the deep end with spicy topics because this is a spicy little topic we're going to be hitting on. 2026, many people are saying it's going to be the year of the recall. There's also many people who are saying, "Oh, but the recall, the standards are so hard to achieve. They're so difficult to achieve. Some of the recalls are doomed for failure." And as it turns out, maybe, as I say, to avoid getting sued again, maybe some recalls are designed for failure in order to try to make a little bit of sense out of the one out of Southern Alberta that's getting a lot of people's attention. I'm very excited to welcome to the show the reporter for the Lethbridge Herald, who has been doing almost all of the heavy lifting on this story, which is super awesome. Very excited to welcome to the program Alexandra Noad. Alexandra, thank you so much for being willing to come on the show and have this conversation today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to talk about this.
Yeah, it's bonkers. Like the amount of stuff that you found and the roadblocks that appear to be have, I don't know, deliberately maybe set up is pretty wild.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, you're a reporter for the Lethbridge Herald. I always like to spend a little bit of time with our guests talking about who they are and why it is they do what they do. So before we get into this soap opera, who is Alexandra? And to be clear, do you prefer Alexandra,
I
Alex?
usually go by Alex.
Okay,
So
perfect. I will use Alex going forward.
sounds good.
Um, who is Alex Node, and how did you get into journalism?
That is kind of also a crazy saga. So a couple years ago, I want to say in like 2019, I got my first DSLR, and for like $50, because I had a bunch of PC Optimum points, and I got my first camera, and I was like, I really like photography. And but before that, I was the nerd in high school that kept a journal, and I would write about the crazy stuff in my high school. I don't know. As one does when they're a teenager, everything's so important when you're a teenager and such a big deal. But so I got this camera and I fell in love, and but then COVID happened, and post COVID, I was like, you know what? I think I want to pursue this. So I took digital communications at Lethbridge College slash now Lethbridge Polytechnic, and in between my second and third year, one of my classmates who worked at the Herald for a little bit, she got pregnant, and she's like, "Hey, Alex, there's an opening. I think you should apply." So I went on to X and I DM'd the editor at the time, Al Bieber, and I was like, "Hey, I hear you have an opening. Can I drop by and give a resume?" And so that's what I did. And then I found a story, and I was like, "Hey, you know what? Do you mind if I just cover the story? That way you can see how I work, how I write, and see if I'm a good fit." So that's what I did, and it landed me the job. And so I've been at the Lethbridge Herald for just about a year and a half now. And so I'm pretty new at this. This is actually my first investigative journalism piece. So I've been learning the ropes of this pretty much along the way. So this is also a brand new experience for me as it is for everybody else watching this.
I mean, and I want to just take a second to highlight how um, needed what you're talking about is, because one of the things that has happened in the journalism landscape in Canada is it has been wildly eroded, and they have seen that particularly in more rural centers. No disrespect to Lethbridge, we're a very cute city and everything. Um, but in the more rural areas, that's where it's been difficult for journalists to maintain sort of a foothold, especially with the large consortiums coming in. And that's to say nothing of investigative journalism in the smaller centers. That is a very under-resourced area of journalism. So I just really want to take a second to acknowledge how cool it is what you're doing is, because there's just not enough of that.
There isn't. And I actually had a few conversations with my editor about this because, I mean, it's weird that I'm the face of this story, even though my face isn't in the paper, but I'm really the face of this. You know, if you look at the recall that we're going to talk about, it's my name behind it that has been, you know, keeping this on top of people's minds. And that's, what our job is to, you know, we can speculate, but it like, when we our main job as like what I've learned is investigative reporting isn't about necessarily uncovering it as it is more keeping, topics like this forefront of people's minds so that, people who do have those skills and, they're able to like actually, they remember it. Because if you just say it once, people are going to forget about that. And I'll kind of get deeper into that once we go along. But yeah, like, there's a lot of regulations when it comes to investigative journalism, especially. Um, Obviously, you've had a little taste of what can happen if you say the wrong thing. Um, but even for like, paper journalism, we're almost held at a higher standard than, everyday people. And so, and even for when I post on my social media, like I have to be extremely careful that, what I'm putting out can either be backed up or that I and even if it can be backed up, I still have to, do my due diligence and reach out to these people, which can be a little difficult sometimes.
For sure. For the record, I'd just like to clarify. I don't believe that I said the wrong thing. I
For
believe
sure.
that I said the thing about maybe the person who didn't the wrong person to say those things about from a provocative standpoint. Just to be clear, because if I don't say that, my lawyers are going to kill me.
No,
Um,
that's fair.
so let's get into it because we got a little bit of an inkling of this story,
Mhm.
and then you picked it up and absolutely ran with it. So we're like, we're just going to stay out of Alex's way. But it seems to a lot of it seems to have started with this bizarre little email of this bizarre little meeting. Now I know that
Mhm.
you've covered the email as well, so I'm not gonna to take over your space there. But how did you first hear about the air quotes recall of Nathan Newdorf in Lethbridge East?
So yeah, it's obviously I heard about it like when I first heard about it, I thought it was, a recall. And so I personally reached out to do like kind of the general like, hey, we would like to interview you, kind of just see what you're about, just kind of get that information on. And I didn't get anything back, but as a journalist, I'm so busy working on other stories, and lots of people don't get back to us. So I didn't really think anything of it. And then our phone started ringing like off the hook, where people are like, "Hey, do you have like Ryan Tanner's like contact info? Because he's not getting back to us." And around that time, um we then found out that there was this whole other group of people who actually did apply. They spent the $500, and then they a couple of days later they actually get a phone call being like, "Hey, sorry, somebody else beat you to it," and the somebody else was this random this sorry this Ryan Turner. And um I so then at that point, we're kind of still putting pieces together. Ryan Tanner isn't responding to us. So I then had to reach out again and be like, hey, people are starting to like question things, and um like they're kind of getting frustrated that you're not getting back to them. I just want to touch base what's going on. And that's a big part of it, is trying to get all sides of the story and try to fit these pieces in. So I then, get into contact with this other group that then told me that, they had a website built, they had a bank account, they had, a financial officer. Everything was in place. And they were actually emailing Ryan Tanner to like help them because they were getting these emails of, oh my gosh, I'm so swamped, I don't know what to do. um And but then as soon as they offered their help, I heard that he completely ghosted them. And so then I was like, okay, that's weird because like these people are willing to help you. Why are you not accepting their help? But it's early on, and you kind of have to give these people the benefit of the doubt, especially as a journalist. So that's kind of what we did. We're like, and so the first article was literally, hey, something weird is going on because a group had everything set up and then they got beat, and but this other person isn't accepting their help that they're offering. And the first one, people were like, oh, that's really weird. And then we get more comment, like I got like a couple of more emails of saying, hey, I have a similar experience where I went to, email for canvassing, and I got like, apparently they were, some of them got like a pretty much like a form of, hey, please fill out this form, pretty much saying your age, your postal, and that kind of information so that we can verify. And so some of them did and didn't hear back. And then that's when I saw your email that you posted from um, where there was a meeting. And when I first saw that, I was like, oh, that's really interesting. However, as a journalist, it wasn't like I could post that because I didn't know where it came from. Um, there it didn't really have a whole lot of information. So I have to then take things like that as with a grain of salt. Not saying that they're not true, but I have to take it as a grain of salt because I can't post things without knowing where they came from. And so finally, and I had a lot of like my editor and this other group, they did a lot of legwork because they're like, we want to get it to the bottom of this. So finally, the two members who they were the, as far as I know now, they were the only two members who were even able to get in, like kind of in, not an interview, but they were able to get the forms for the canvassing. And one of them, she went in, and there was this guy named Mike. And the first one, she was there a little bit early because she wanted breakfast before work. And so this Mike guy comes in and he has forms, and she was very surprised that there wasn't more people because she knew like dozens of people who wanted to be part of this. And so she's like, why isn't anybody like really here? And it was at its importance. So there was people there, but they were kind of mingling. Like you could tell that they were just like meeting up for coffee. And so then this Mike guy comes in with like a clipboard, and she's like, oh, okay. Perfect. And she then like he kind of fills it out, but he from from the story that these women told me, like he had no idea what he was doing. Like he had no idea about the recall. And so these the second woman came in later, like maybe a couple of minutes while the first woman was filling out the application form to become a canvasser. And but the second woman was a little bit more apprehensive. She was like, hey, do you know who this Ryan Tanner is? And according to Mike, he said, I don't know who Ryan Tanner is. And at that moment, she was like, I don't want anything to do with this. Like, what the heck? Like, no. And so, and I must add, like, the Mike apologized, saying, hey, I'm really sorry I had to come from the west side. Now, at the time, like, the first woman didn't really think anything of that. But immediately, I caught that as a red flag because in order to be a part of the recall, you have to be in the same constituency. And the west side of Lethbridge is not in Lethbridge East. So
I want to jump in for a quick sec because we've covered so much ground, and I want to make sure that
sorry.
we're not leaving anyone behind, because there's some names and details and things and stuff. So the first thing that I wanted to highlight, you've name dropped Ryan Tanner,
Yes.
and that is the applicant for the petition. And the petition itself is fascinating, I'll say, because, and I've seen some commentary on social media, and of course, as a journalist, you can't say this as a whatever I am, I can. There's been a lot of people who have said that is the least masculine handwriting I think I've ever seen in my life. And there's elements of the handwriting, like if you really want to go down the rabbit hole, there's elements of the handwriting that include cursive, which is not something that you see used a whole lot anymore. It tends to be something used in, let's go with, the older population. So that's it's an interesting little piece. But Ryan Tanner is the applicant. And the email address, I'm curious, just to make sure that we hit all of our little points. The email address on the application is recallneudorf@gmail.com. I assume this is one of the email addresses that you reached out to,
Yes. That
and
is
you
the
never got
email.
any response.
I did not get one response.
Okay.
Not even the form that was mass sent out to a lot of people, including um, Total Recall Alberta, who kind of did a little digging as well.
Yeah, they've been the ones who've been tracking all the recalls. They're not affiliated with any of the recalls. They're just a group of concerned citizens, from my understanding.
Yep.
Um, Okay, so that's and the explanation for the recall. I find this fascinating because one of the things that the UCP and the people who have been subject of recalls have taken umbrage with has been, oh, that's a very vague statement. I don't know about that. And I want to take a sec just to read out the statement that was thrown up or included with the recall petition because, I mean, if you're talking vague. Nathan Newdorf should act as the voice and representative of Lethbridge East constituents. Recent voting activity from him demonstrates a disconnect and his inability to meet the needs, desires, and expectations of those he represents. We need a leader who meets these responsibilities. That's the whole thing there. And I love, for the record, and this is where I geek out over this stuff a little bit. We've got the Oxford comma, no less. Which is not. That is that is some writing detail. That is you have to be a fairly high level of nerd to appreciate, I think. Um, so Mike is not Ryan, right?
No.
Okay, so we've got Mystery Mike who shows up at the Tim Hortons and says, "I don't actually know the organizer of the petitions, but please hand over your personal information." And these two ladies go, "Oh, I don't know about that." What happened after that?
So one of them did fill out the application. And from my knowledge, she never received any of her canvassing package, which is also interesting. And this was like almost a month ago. It would have been a month ago tomorrow. So on the second, it was, and so after that, uh, it's I think, yeah, bar one of them, one of the ladies who rejected was like, "Hey, this is really weird. I don't want to be a part of this." Um, she decided to leave, and so it was just the first lady. And so she decided to kind of question this Mike, and um, she was like, if you don't know who Ryan Tanner is, where the heck did you get these things? And do you even know what a recall is? And he was like, I have no idea. And then allegedly, he name dropped Soraya Seaborn, who happens to work in Newdorf's office. So, and for the record, I have contacted Soraya and said, hey, there is speculation and rumors saying that you uh, gave somebody these canvassing sheets to fill out. Do you want to speak on that? And she denied. So that's just for the record. But
So to restate that, just to be clear, Mike, Mystery Mike, uh, says that he got the forms from somebody who works in Nathan Newdorf's constituency office. You did your due diligence as a journalist to confirm, and the constituency office worker said, "Oh no, it wasn't me." So that there's some dissonance there. I feel like I'm safe to say that from Okay, so uh constituents Mike, who doesn't know anything about anything, all of a sudden knows the constituency office worker's name, drops that, she denies everything. Keep going.
And so um this woman then decided to send a letter to Elections Alberta because she was like, what the heck is going on? Like what is going on? Like this just is screaming red flags and somebody needs to get involved. And so at this point, I then have to call Elections Alberta. I'm also trying to get in contact with Ryan Tanner. So I call Elections Alberta and I try to explain the situation, being like, there's a lot of speculation. I just want to get in touch with Ryan Tanner. And they're like, unfortunately, we're not able to give you his phone number, which makes sense, but we'll pass you along to our media contact. So their media contact was able to give me some information about what the legislation allows them to do. And pretty much they told me is our hands are tied with this because technically, according to the legislation, those who apply don't have to get any signatures. We just need the information back at the end of the time. What is it, 90 days?
Yeah.
I think.
So to be clear, I just want to again really make sure that I'm spelling this out.
Yes.
Um, in a shocking twist, UCP legislation has some unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences of the legislation is the way the law is written. Somebody can say, hey, I don't like that uh, person, and I would maybe I grew up with them or something. I don't know. Maybe I like them a lot and I don't want them to get recalled. So what I'm going to do, maybe, I don't know, is I'm going to start a recall. And there's nothing in the legislation that holds any accountability to the person who raises their hand and says, I would like to do this recall. There's no test of good faith. There's no requirements for minimum number of signatures. There's nothing like that. And so somebody can, using the recall legislation, say, hey, I want to recall so and so. Maybe I don't actually want to recall them. Maybe I just want to throw up a shield around them because you can only be recalled once in a term. And am I getting that right? Is that what Elections Alberta effectively communicated?
Yes. And I've also talked to political science who also confirmed that is that, due to the UCP's not doing their lack of due diligence in creating this legislation, and in his words, not consulting the experts because any political science would say, hey, this is going to backfire on you. And there's also a bunch of holes in this legislation.
Okay.
That, yes.
Okay. So you're trying to get a hold of Ryan. Um, did you ever get a hold of Ryan?
That's where it gets really interesting. So through the pipeline, I am given a number that supposedly is for Ryan Tanner. So I give it a call, and from somebody answers. However, it doesn't sound like a middle-aged man. It sounds like much younger, like I would say late teens, early 20s. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe, you know what, at this point, maybe. And so I go, hi, is this Ryan Tanner? He confirms. He's like, yes. And I go, I just wanted to confirm that you're the um, kind of applicant for this recall. And literally, as soon as I say that, he goes, why? Like, straight, like, why? And I was like, oh, I'm just with the Lethbridge Herald. I just want to, have a conversation to see where it's at and, kind of how it's going. And literally he goes, okay, like it's like I'm getting stonewalled at this point. And so I'm like, okay, would you be able to like talk to me about that? Like, do you have, and she goes, I'm really busy. I'm like, like it's such an awkward conversation. So, okay, like, you know what? Have a great day. Like, let's just get out of this situation. And I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then I want to say about like less than a minute back later, I get a phone call back and be like, I actually don't know who Ryan Tanner is. And I'm like, can you just say we're Ryan Tanner? But okay. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. Like, I just, I'm trying to get a hold of him because he's the applicant of this recall and people just really want answers and to like, and I also want to give him the chance to speak for himself as to what's happening. And he goes, like, this kid is like understanding and then I hear like a woman's voice in the background almost like it's like her trying to tell him what to say. And I'm just like, but at that point, like the conversation was done, and I just was like, hey, like, I'm sorry, have a great day. I, so that was really interesting. And I was like, as soon as my editor walked in after that phone call, I'm like, you're not gonna believe this.
Is the number still in service? I'm just curious
As far as I know, yes.
because that sounds like somebody who was about to change their phone number. I don't know.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, so this is so bonkers. So you get a hold of a phone number that belongs to Ryan Tanner. You talk to somebody who identifies himself as Ryan Tanner, but doesn't sound like he fits the age demographic. The phone call is very awkward. You hang up. You immediately get a call back saying, "Wait, I don't know who Ryan Tanner is. Never mind." And it sounds like there's somebody in the background showing this kid cue cards. Am I getting that right?
Yeah.
That's bonkers. Okay. And um, what happened after that?
Well, somebody did a little digging and found out that the um I guess like email recovery email for Recall Newdorf was not what they thought it would be. And it started with a GN and they kind of figured out who might be behind it. And it was somebody with not the name Ryan Tanner.
And this is where, like, I'm going to link that because I think it's a Substack. I think it is. I'm going to
Yes.
link that in the show notes because it is a bonkers little ride down. I mean, I don't know if you've independently tried to do the same things that were done in that, the Substack post, but they have screenshots and they spell it all out very, very clearly. And it's very apparent that um, it is not a tremendous leap, I'll say, to associate the email address with the recall submission, with the very not masculine handwriting, to a different figure
Mhm.
in Lethbridge politics, kind of. Walk
Kind of.
walk me through that.
So yeah, I have actually tried to call this person. It is a woman, and she was formerly on the school board. So she is an elected official, and I found her number very easily, thanks to social media. And so I give her a call and I go, hey, just a heads up, like there's some allegations. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to speak on them. And then I go and I text her and I'm like, hey, I left a message, but just let you know, I want to give you an opportunity to speak on these allegations. I'm not, accusing you of anything. And like, I just want to give you an opportunity to kind of clear your name. And that's literally what I said. And then, I didn't hear anything. And I then kind of tried to push a little bit and be like, hey, you know what? These rumors are not going to go anywhere unless you speak on them. Like, and for me, the red flag was like, I was like, you know what? She's a former elected official. She was voted by the people. Like, she's now a public figure, whether she likes it or not. And so I was like, why is she not jumping on the gun? I'm literally giving her an opportunity to be like, hey, this isn't true. Like, this isn't me. Like, and she didn't respond. So that was really interesting. And unfortunately, just due to that, even though like I did repost it on my Twitter, and the reasoning before that is like you said, he spelled it all out. There's screenshots. It's really easy to figure out. Like you can't just make this up. Like because he like the way he like literally spelled out his theory is
And the
why I
methodology.
posted it. Yes.
Yeah. Did she ever get back to you at all?
Nope.
Cool. That's and I want to be clear here again, and this is I want to highlight this. This is not I mean, you're a real journalist. You
Yeah.
are a real journalist with a publication out of Lethbridge that's well known in the Lethbridge area. So this isn't like, hey, it's Nate from the Breakdown. I have some questions. Would you be willing to answer them? This is mainstream journalism, and all of these people are simply refusing to. And again, I just want to be clear on the language that you use, just to make sure. At no point was it accusatory, right? Like you weren't like, "Hey, you're the one. Why'd you do this?" You were like, "I'd like to give you the opportunity to speak to this."
Yes. And I also need to clarify. I did say, "Hey, I'm Alexandra from the Lethbridge Herald."
Yeah.
Um, you know, that's how we're not in journalism, we're not allowed to hide under any fake pretenses by any means. Well, like we have to be upfront, be like, "Hey, I'm a journalist. This is who I work for."
Standards
Um,
are important.
yeah. Yeah, that's like that was really surprising. I mean, I shouldn't be surprised, but it was still surprising. I was like, and like it was like I even said, I was like, I'm not accusing you of anything. I want you to like, give you a chance to clear this. And like I could not made it have made it any more clear that it was an opportunity for her to clear her name. And she chose not to.
Now, there's a couple other pieces that I want to explore here because
Mhm.
I've been following the what you have posted on Twitter quite closely. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation. But there's some other small little weird pieces because you also posted that you um, were able to identify as we're trying to figure out who this mystery 20-year-old voice is, 20-year-old sounding voice
Mhm.
is. It turns out that as per social media, uh, there's a very strong possibility that Mr. Ryan Tanner has a son of that age.
Yes. Yes.
Cool, I guess. Um, have you, here's the question that I'll ask. Have you been able to establish any connections between all of these characters? Like, did you ever figure out who Mike was? Let's start with that.
Yes. So, through the grapevine, I was able to contact Mike, which was also an interesting conversation. So, uh, the internet is free and it has a lot of information. And it was funny because my editor was like, "Oh, I'll see if I can find like his phone number through the grapevine." And I was like, "I just Googled it and I found it. Can I try this?" And he's like, "Sure." And so I did. And, a woman answers the phone now, um through like obviously through discussions with my editor and people who know who this mic is. I was able to come to the conclusion that you know it it sounded like it was in the right age range to be, his wife possibly. So, like, and in this phone call, I just kind of assumed that. And so and I asked, I was like, "Can I please speak to Mike? Is Mike there?" And she said no. And I was like, "Okay, I'm Alexandra Noad. I'm with the Lethbridge Herald. I hear that he might be the volunteer coordinator because that's what I was told for this Neudorf recall campaign. And she goes, I don't even know what that is. And I was like, okay, well, would I be able to speak with Mike? And then I hear click. And I was like, I I guess that's a no.
That
And I
sounds like a no.
yeah.
Uh,
So yeah,
so we have an idea who Mike is, but
yeah,
Mike doesn't want to talk to anyone.
yeah.
Is
And
that
that's why we have quoted him as West Side Mike, because again, for journalism standards, because we haven't been able to confirm
yeah,
his role, we cannot just name drop.
for sure. For sure, for sure. Um, now okay, so I'm gonna try not to get you into trouble here.
Yeah.
Um, there are some folks on social media who have done some digging through the social media networky thingers,
Mhm.
um, and it appears that all of these names, I mean, Mystery Mike or West Side Mike aside, all of the names involved, there is potentially some overlap. Now, I want to be clear, Lethbridge, it's a city. I'm just
Small
gonna,
town,
yeah,
very
I'm
yeah.
gonna run that just
Everybody's
by you.
interconnected. It has a small town feeling.
Yeah, and
So I have also done that digging. However, I know for myself, with all my, connections on social media, some of them I am really close with, and others I'm like, I've met in passing. So just because they are connected in social media does not mean that they're necessarily connected.
which is the point that I was trying to get to in order to make sure that neither of us get sued. I hate that that's part of what I have to navigate now.
I know. It's so much fun.
So, but the if you take a look at the social networks that exist out there that are publicly available, so nobody's privacy is being breached. These are everybody's privacy setting their own. That elected official, allegedly, the person figured out in the Substack, that elected official allegedly is somebody named Ginny Steed. Um, Heavy emphasis on allegedly here. Um, there are a lot of not insignificant social media connections between Ginny Steed and the Tanners en masse. And I imagine it must be very frustrating for you having all of these fascinating little vectors and having everybody refuse to address any of them.
It's incredibly frustrating. And what I feel like I need to emphasize that just because, you know, I you come with a lead to us does not necessarily mean that it can get published, especially in something as significant as a newspaper. There's standards that we have to follow, and it doesn't mean that we think you're lying. It's just because if we're not able to get that other side, we can't, like, it looks very skewed, and we cannot have a skewed looking paper. That's just the basis.
I mean, those are editorial standards, and I understand that. I think, and I'll just articulate this for fun. I think that there is a very strong argument to be made that if, at a certain point, if people are choosing to skew the perception of things through their choices of not addressing them, um, there's some ownership of that that has to happen with the individuals. Um, that's just my personal thoughts, but I'm getting sued for $6 million. So what are you going to do? Uh, is there
I think
anything?
I think we're at the point where, it's very obvious. And like, even though I do, like, especially like if you've read my last article, I make it blatantly clear that I have attempted in every manner to get a hold of these people. Obviously multiple times without harassing them.
Yeah.
Um, and they're just not communicating with
So here's, I guess, the questions. The
me.
what, and I want to be clear about two things. First of all, thanks to the incredibly robust way that the recall legislation was written, there are no laws being broken by anybody doing this. If in fact the recall effort is an entirely bad faith effort and nobody has any intentions of um, following through with any sort of recall effort on Mr. Newdorf. That's not illegal. There's nothing. There's no recourse. That's just a thing that people can do. Um, I also feel like it would be irresponsible of me to not point out that Mr. Newdorf has vociferously denied any knowledge of the recall. So he has publicly stated on the record that he's got absolutely nothing to do with this. I'm curious though, are you aware of any connections between Mr. Newdorf and any of these individuals directly or tangentially?
It's it, it's hard for like that too because um I I'm trying to be very careful what I do say, but there are, due to the industry that Neudorf has um history in, and if you look up Ryan Tanner, his uh industry that he works in or has he owns several companies in, there's a lot of overlap. So there's a lot of speculation, possibly, but it's also important to know that business relationships and personal relationships can be very separate, and we can't just assume that, because they've crossed paths business wise, that they're buddy buddy.
I mean, one would, yeah, and you're 100% right. And I want to be very, very clear on that as well, just because they might run in similar circles or they maybe have attended similar board meetings or anything like that. That does not mean that there's any sort of collusion between the two on the recall effort. One would think that a very effective way to clarify that would be if any of these people answered your phone calls. So where is it at now? Like at this moment in time, have you heard of anybody doing any kind of canvassing? Have you seen any kind of activity? Are they all on vacation? What's happening?
As far as I know, nothing is happening. I have not heard of any canvassers. As far as I know and I'm aware of, there is nothing. There's no signatures being collected. It's nothing. So it will be really interesting to see what the next 7 weeks has to offer. Um, I know that there's a lot of people who want to get to the bottom of this, and they are incredibly frustrated with the actions, while lawful, the questionable ethical.
Morally
Um,
dubious?
Um, and so I know that there's going to be a lot of people jumping down a bunch of rabbit holes, and yeah. I guess, what do you see happening in the next 7 weeks here?
Yeah, well, that's where it gets really interesting because it's taken so many wild House of Cards turns already, and there's still so much time left. And I find myself wondering, and I'll ask you to take off your journalist hat and just sort of give me your perspective on this. But like, it seems to me that this is yet another example of people leaning directly into the Streisand effect, um, and doing a very, very good job of taking something that may or may not have had any weight. And again, it goes back to what I said at the opening. Like we saw, there's been pleas from the people who are organizing the Demetrius Nicolaides recall, and that's the one that everybody's kind of said, well, if one's going to go, it'll be that one because there's a lot of pissed off teachers. Um, they're having challenges getting to where they need to get, and so it is a very high bar. Um, and yes, there is this theoretical protection that could be offered by starting I don't want to use the word fake, um, uh, bad faith recall effort for the elected individual. But it seems to me that there's like a risk reward balance of, okay, so you'd want to make sure that your MLA doesn't get recalled. And you've heard that there's some people who are thinking about doing it. You have two choices. You can go, well, if those people over there are able to get the required number of signatures to force a recall vote and then force the by-election, cool. Let them take a kick at the can, whatever. Or you could go, let's do this big top secret spy thing and then hide from the media despite the fact that there's names on publicly available forms. Why do people do this?
You know what? I wish I could like really know the answer to that. And what's funny is I know we've mentioned it a few times, but for those of you who have never been to Lethbridge, it is a small town. Like everybody knows everybody, and it's all about who you know. And the these allegations are not about just some, I don't know, random person down the road. They have significant connections in the city. And a lot of people know them. If and all it takes is a Google search of Ryan Tanner to realize he co-owns several businesses. And, then we have a former elected official. And we, there's also rumors that even people in Newdorf's office, you know, and while they have denied those ones, which is fair, and I appreciate that they answered my phone call. Um, Everybody else is staying silent, and it begs the question as what did you think would happen,
This is
especially in rural Alberta where everybody knows you.
Well, that's the thing. And like, I mean, I spent quite a bit of time in that neck of the woods. My first job in my current profession was in Raymond. And so I'm fairly familiar with the interwoven nature of things. And it's bonkers to me that anybody would think that they could execute something like this and then just go radio silent and no one would notice. Like that's just so wild to me. Um, I don't get it.
Me neither. Me neither. We're all scratching our heads over here.
And I can't like here's the other thing that I don't understand. And this is why I think it would be so good if like Mystery Mike and all of these other people just came forward and set the record straight. Um, that is some like if you're gonna name drop someone, I don't understand what the end game is. To attend this thing where you're going to collect people's information and then name drop a constituency association worker and just be like, ha ha ha, I've got them now. Like I don't see what the end game is there unless you're trying to destabilize the whole recall effort that you're trying to keep quiet. It gets very, very bonkers. I'm curious, has Elections Alberta said anything? Because I know that this is something that people have expressed quite a bit of concern over the collection of the private information because there were people who submitted forms online. There were people who submitted emails and said, I would like to do this. Here's my information. And I'm wondering, I appreciate that under the legislation, they're allowed to engage in this sort of bad faith exercise. But when you start to collect people's information, um, personal information under false pretense,
Mhm.
that starts to sound a little bit criminal. I'm no lawyer or cop, but is there anything there?
I don't know. From what I understand, Elections Alberta, their hands are tied. They told me that they just have to follow the legislation. And but I know many people are now concerned about not only their information, but then it begs the question of, okay, if they do start canvassing, do I want to give my signature to this people? What are they going to do with it? Because they've gone what 3 weeks, a full month without with going radio silent, not doing anything. Obviously there's now speculation on who's even behind everything. Um, you know, do do we even trust these people? And yeah, there's a lot of I think, And when I was talking to the political scientist, he's like, at the end of this, the UCP are gonna have to either A, scrap it, scrap the legislation and say, okay, this was actually not a good idea, or they're going to have to seriously mend it because there's obviously these gaping holes like security information. And even as a journalist, like I have to be extremely careful about what information I give out to who. And um I have to like, obviously be careful because I am in a position where I am able to collect personal information, whether it be, phone numbers, stuff like that. Like that I don't just give that out willy-nilly. Like I have to be, very careful. So then there's obviously, what is happening with this recall where it's just getting stalled and nothing's happening. And so yeah, there's a lot of gaping holes in the legislation. So Elections Alberta really doesn't have a lot of power. And they're they asked for, quite a bit of money and they only got like a little bit of what they asked for, which is also really important to look at that they're, underfunded in their sense. They don't believe that they have now. Other people will say they're the highest funded in the country. However, they're also having to deal with what 26 recalls right now, and that's a lot of information, a lot of work, and you know they yeah it's a whole mess. And unfortunately, Elections Alberta, their power, they just have to follow the legislation. They don't have and people have that's what they've been telling people is we don't really have power to do anything against this. You'll have to go to like somebody else, like pretty much somebody else who, we don't have the power. So
Yeah, it's wild to me that and I want to be very, very clear. There's no part of this episode that is intended on dunking on EA, Elections Alberta, simply because you're 100% right. They asked for a significant amount of money to be able to support the recall efforts, and the committee in the same meeting, I believe, where they ostensibly fired the Auditor General, they said. No, you cannot have that money. You can have a little tiny bit of the money, and we'll see where we go from there. And you're also bang on in that they can only operate within the power of the legislation. But that brings up another question for me, and that is, and I'm going to ask the follow up is do you have any other roads that you're pursuing down? Is this story done unless somebody sticks their head up, or because it seems to me that a very easy way to for the Mystery Mike and the former school board trustee who some have alleged is directly involved in this and the Tanner group, uh, it seems to me a very easy way for them to address this would be like, hey, you know what? We think he's doing a great job. He's done some things for the community that we stand for, and we're not going to just stand by and let somebody do a recall on this guy to be spiteful. So yeah, we pulled the trigger, and yeah, we're not going to organize the recall, and we're not breaking any laws. So go suck an egg. There's nothing wrong with that. And so that's another piece that surprises me that they that's not an avenue that's being addressed. But another thing that I find really fascinating that I want to get your thoughts on before we get to um, the are there any other avenues? I've watched a lot of UCP press conferences, and I have heard in the legislature and at these press conferences a lot of talking points about the changes that need to be made to the Recall Act, including you can get it done for so cheap, and you just have to write a few paragraphs, and it's just anybody can recall anybody now, and it's not even about it's activists and unions organizing to try to overthrow the government. Topple the government, I believe is the phrase they like to throw around. I have not heard any commentary from the UCP or the premier about And also, there's this chicanery that maybe is going on in Lethbridge East, and that's not the intent of the legislation either. So we should probably address that too. Have you heard any of them address the situation in Lethbridge East?
No, and even from Newdorf, I've asked him, I'm like, what are your thoughts on this? And he's like, I mean, I'm not happy about it, but obviously he doesn't want to get recalled. So, I mean, like, that's what's also really interesting is like nobody's actually talking about what is happening. And um, I, this is very much speculation. I feel like if the tables were turned, it would be a different story.
I would almost feel like the tables have been turned and it is a different story, but what do I know? That's speculation. Um, what is left? Are there any other articles coming down the pipe? Do you have any other avenues that you're pursuing? Is there anybody like, hey, 20-year-old Tanner kid, want to clear your name? This is who you should talk to. How do people get a hold of Alex? Ugh. Um,
Alex, it's all good.
once it gets in my head, I'm not very bright.
Right? It's all
Um, all of those questions.
Yeah, so obviously as a journalist, I want to keep this on top of people's mind because even for me, like I said, when this first started, I sent an email and I kind of completely forgot about it. And so I want to keep it on people's minds because it is really important and it is something really funky that's going on and it needs to be talked about. As for different avenues, obviously talking to experts, continue to try to, obviously respectfully try to get them to speak out. And then also just getting the different perspectives and continuing to follow up if there are any more leads. I know I've said this before, just because there's a lead does not mean that I can necessarily slap it on the paper. I do need to do my due diligence and I need to be careful about what I write and how I write it. And but obviously I am going to keep a very, very, very close eye, and you will be continuing to hear about this story. Now, will I have any, breaking news? Maybe, but the way things are going, probably not. I am gonna be in the it is a new year, but in the next, week or so, I do plan on speaking with Rob Miyashiro, who is in the Lethbridge West constituency, and I plan on speaking to him to get his thoughts on what's happening, and kind of his concerns, because obviously this isn't super democratic. It's a lot of people are feeling like this sucks. Like I do not get to have my voice heard, even though I want to. Um, and yeah, so I will continue to follow this. As for updates, it just depends on either what people find or if somebody chooses to speak up.
I wanna throw it out there. Your Twitter handle, and it's still Twitter to me, is Alex. What's your middle name? Your Twitter handle's weird. You have two X's in there.
Yes. So I just have ALEXXNOADD.
So it's just the double letters on the end. Is there another
Yeah,
Alex Noad out there?
I don't think so.
Okay, I'm like that would be wild.
Actually, I
Um,
think there is, but they're like in like across the ocean. But
okay.
it's really weird. I'm like, that's not a very common name, but
It
okay.
is. It is not. So the Twitter handle is at ALEXXNOADD. Anywhere else people should, I mean, obviously Lethbridge Herald, anywhere else people should be going if they want to keep abreast with your efforts on this chicanery.
That's usually about it, where I kind of keep it on Twitter and obviously the Lethbridge Herald. I usually just post the articles and I mean, I know that there's other apps, but I'm kind of old fashioned and Twitter's my main one. So
There we go. I got to say the your header on your Twitter profile, the big bridge in Lethbridge.
Yes.
You want to know a fun little piece of lore?
Sure.
My grandfather, he was a journalist down in southern Alberta as well. He owned and ran the Tabor Times for a good number of years. He was one of the first people, and if you really believe the family lore, he was the first one. But he was one of the first people to walk across that bridge when it was constructed.
Wow, that is so
Right?
cool.
Yeah. So there's my claim to Lethbridge fame. Alex, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to chat today. And I'm going to make sure that we link in that the Substack article that we referenced heavily there that makes all of the allegations that are unproven in a court of law. Rana. Thank you so much for taking the time. Is there anything else you want people to hear? Is there anything else you want people to know?
I just kind of want to reiterate that, like, this is my very first investigative journalism piece, so I am learning on the fly. And so, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And thank you for everybody who has been following me and supporting me on this journey. You know who you are, but I really, really appreciate it. And yeah, thanks so much for having me on here.
I have one last question. I'm sorry, I
Sure.
should have asked this one earlier. I always do this where I'm like, let's wrap it up. Wait, never mind. Um, have you asked for any comment from the Premier's office on this yet?
I have not. It's been mostly it's I mean, obviously it happened like beginning of December, and that's usually a really crazy time. So again, like in the new year, I plan on continuing to dive into this, and we'll definitely follow up on that.
Her press secretary's name is Sam Blackett. I'm sure he would love to get an email from you.
I'm sure he would.
Alex, thank you so much. I'm gonna get in so much trouble for this episode. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat tonight, and please keep us up to date on everything that's going on down there.
Absolutely, I will. Thank you so much.
And that's it for another episode of The Breakdown. As always, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here, we would love nothing more than if you thought about signing up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab, where for just the price of a fancy cup of coffee a month, you can help us continue to produce this kind of content. Whether you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, in which case maybe leave a review and a rating, or whether you're watching it on one of our streaming platforms, we want to say a big thank you to everybody who is part of the Breakdown's audience. And as always, take care of each other and keep the conversation going.